Let's take a look at the way they line up for the Castle Grand Final. From position 1, car 17, Queensland's Dick Johnson. From 262 is Jim Richards in the BMW. From 3, car 5, Peter Brock in the Commodore. From 421, Rob Francevic in the Volvo. From 5, car 3, Kent Bagent in the BMW. From 6.2, Steve Masterton in the Commodore. 731, Neville Crichton in the BMW. From 877, Peter Williamson, a surprise in the Toyota. From 926, Colin Bond of the Alpha. From 10, car 12, Wilmington in the Jaguar. From 1123, Tony Longhurst in the BMW. And rounding out the 1296, Tim Slaker all the way from in Australia. 10 seconds away from the start of the Castrol Grand Final at Oran Park Raceway, Sydney. And they're off, and Johnson, no, Brock has split them. Heading down the front straight, and Peter Brock gets away. Johnson hasn't got off to a good one. Now he comes back. Masterton coming in with the muscle, and Richards slips up here on the inside with Francevic already up into second, and Johnson down on the inside of Jim Richards and takes him too. So Johnson comes up running in third, but it'll be Peter Brock. Just a gaggle of cars as they come through that corner, go beneath the Goodyear Bridge and head down now to Volvo. Brocky will lead it. Had pole position taken away from him. Francevic is in second, third is Johnson, fourth is Jim Richards, and fifth a blinder from Peter Williamson.
Not only a blinder from Peter Williamson, Blako is in 6th spot, coming off 12th position on the grid.
The tyres will not be warm, would you agree, Neil Crompton, for a lap or so as they go over the Goodyear Bridge. And the crowd coming alive here as Brocky in the 05 leads. Francevic doing a little dance across the racetrack, and John zeroed right in behind him.
No, I was just outside before, Michael, and it is very, very cold out there. It'll take some time to get heat into the tyres. But look now as Dick Johnson goes underneath Robbie Francevic. He's poking and prodding and looking for a way through. But impressive is Pete Williamson. That's incredible in car number 77.
Knows the track well. Castrol corner again. Brocky will lead them across the strike. Robbie Francevic looking good at this stage. Watch the speed of Francevic's Volvo as Johnson tailgates now down Oran Park's front straightaway. Sitting in it, and right behind him is Jim Richards, ready to pounce already. To the left-hander, they come down to Pepsi corner. There's Kiwi Rob trying to keep the machine at least straight under brakes. Johnson, the next one, followed by Richards. And back behind Richards is Peter Williamson, a blinder, Slako, Masterton being the next one through.
Tell you what, when he does keep that Volvo in a straight line, does it not fly?
And hasn't he caught Brock? In only a lap and a half, Johnson's up to keep them very, very honest, but you'll find the next time down the front straight just how many horses the Brock 05 Mobile Commodore has. Here they come across the bridge. The cars stream through there, including Tim Slako, Neville Crichton going through as well. They've cleared out from the main bunch. But this is where Francevic should have Johnson on his tailpipe as they come up towards Yamaha corner. And Johnson's car is very, very quick indeed from this point of the racetrack through the lefts and the rights.
Superior handling of the Mustang here should close the gap, as Mike Raymond suggests, on Robbie Francevic in the Volvo. And he's got to close up here because it was pretty noticeable on the last lap, and we'll watch it again here, that on the straight, Francevic does have the legs on Johnson's car.
Well, this is where Francevic should be able to put some pressure on Peter Brock. He's fairly close to Brock now. He's going to swing to the outside and make the super leap right down the outside in the Castrol Volvo. But Brock says, no way, fight for it. Brock back in front again, and the front end dancing around a little there under brakes. Francevic close enough to pounce. Johnson's joined them for a three-way tailgate, and Richards is there, making it a four-sided run for the lead. Williamson back in fifth, and here comes Robbie. Well, thought about it anyway, but he's close enough now to maybe out-drag Brock down the front straight the next time round.
Only place he's ever going to get past Brock is on that front straight, I would think. I don't know that the Volvo's got the handling to get by on the back part of the course, and Brock's pretty determined to hold him out, doesn't matter where.
Once again, they go over the Goodyear Bridge and come into the next turn. Brock a little sideways. Here's Johnson. Johnson's quick through here. Francevic getting a little closer to the 05. And how close is Johnson? Johnson might sit in behind Francevic unless he's a bit too taily. And that's as taily as you can get when you've got a Mustang. And Richards saying, we've had enough of this. I want to get on with the lead. Over the flip-flop, Brock and 05 for the Mobile Commodore team, and looking good at this stage. Trouble at Amaru, didn't look comfortable, looks much better here today. In second is Francevic, all over him. Then Dick Johnson and Peter Williamson sitting in behind Jim Richards. Now is the chance for Francevic as he pulls out going down the front straight. Brock can't do much about it. He can't race him in unless he tries to tuck him here on the inside. Now on the brakes with the Volvo. Will it stop? And will it turn? Yes, it does. And Robbie Francevic of New Zealand goes through in the silver turbo Volvo to take the lead in the 10th round of the Australian Touring Car Championship. Brock is second. Third is Johnson. Richards fourth.
Well, now, can Brock sustain, or withstand, rather, the pressure that Dick Johnson is going to try and apply? Francevic in front. Why, gee, that little orange car of Williamson's is still poking right in there for an under 3-litre car.
Yeah.
He's really done something amazing with it since we last saw it.
Well, he's rebuilt the engine, of course, since the demise of the car in practice for last weekend's Amaroo meeting. They've done a lot of changes to the suspension on the car. They've improved at no end, and Willow's absolutely flying. He said to me yesterday, by gee, it feels good in the warm-up, and it certainly has come good. 2.8-litre, 6-cylinder, fuel-injected Toyota Supra, and it's flying.
But the four biggest names of touring car racing in Australia for 85 are on the track in front of him, and everybody else is nowhere.
Look for them as they come out of the bend, and here is Dick Johnson in behind Peter Brock. Brock running in second. I think he might have the legs on the Mustang down the straight. Richards pretty close to those two, and Johnson's only chance here is perhaps on the run off the bridge. The car is very quick indeed there, and if Brock holds the cars of Johnson and Richards up, Francevic is going to have a break, and a good break over the rest of the field.
Yeah, Brock's got more horsepower than Dick Johnson, but Johnson's car handles and brakes so very well
that
he'll be
Richards too.
all over the back of him around this back part of the course. And yes, indeed, Jim Richards right in behind Johnson. He won't want to be held up for too long, although interestingly enough, the JPS team decided to go for the harder D3 compound Pirellis prior to the start of this event, and I would say that they'll probably be in pretty good tyre shape at the end of the distance.
Well, Francevic, the weather couldn't be better for the turbo. Nice chill in the air. It'll be operating quite nicely. No worry today with warm weather here at Oran Park. The action's hot though. Up to Yamaha corner. And there's the gap between Richards and Dick Johnson as Johnson gets once again onto the bumper of the 05 Commodore. Study of concentration. Wouldn't worry about talking to Dick at this stage of the race. I think he's got more on his mind. And that's a win here today in the Castrol Grand Final. Coming out of Castrol corner, incidentally, and Johnson this time comes down the inside of Brock. Brock's car might have a little too much squirt for it in the straight. Dyno telling Johnson what his lap time looked like, a 17.6.
Yes, and Dick Johnson's lap record here in the old Group C car is a 1:17.4. That's just how hard they're pushing the Group A cars.
Here we go again with Dick Johnson closing up between... closing up on Peter Brock, the right-hander now, of course, at Volvo. The run down the short straight to the next right-hander. Francevic is already up on a slower car and taken him. What have we got, a Dolomite or something there in the way? Yes. Now, from this point on, Johnson should make a little bit of ground here on Peter Brock through this next series of corners. Williamson goes through, and Richards once again joins onto the tail of Dick Johnson. There's Kent Bagent, car number 3, obviously with a tyre problem.
Yeah, he qualified extremely well on the third row of the grid. Hasn't been sighted since. Apparently hit a bump on the edge of the track and got the tyre jammed up under the guard. You can see they're having to hammer it out of the way there to get the tyre off and a new one on. But back at the track, and this is the way it goes.
We're into the 6th lap of
Can't take a trick, can I?
35. But the action's all out there. It's in the pits and on the racetrack. Francevic stretching his lead slightly as they try to find the tyre and wheel to go under the guard. Brock still in second. 05 Commodore, and Tricky Dicky from the Sunshine State in the Palmer Motorcraft Mustang. Right behind him is the Australian Championship Series leader, Jim Richards, in the JPS BMW 635.
As you predicted, while all this is going on, Francevic is slipping just that little further away.
Robbie's never been short of confidence. I would say Robbie at this stage just thinking to himself, this race is mine.
Notice on the front of the Mustang that Dick Johnson is using those BBS extractor fans on the wheels to pull some cool air through the middle of the wheel. Johnson was saying earlier on that cools the brakes by some 200 degrees. Some smoke coming from the front right-hand side of the Volvo as he just locks up, and there's Neville Crichton in strife. Car number 31 out and off to the side of the course.
And that is the first time we've seen one of the Frank Gardner prepared cars pull out of a Touring Car Championship run.
And just as we cut away, he was unbuckling the safety harness, so he's not going any further.
So Neville Crichton exits in the 31, the second of the JPS BMWs. Meantime, Robbie Francevic of New Zealand leads in the silver turbo Volvo. Second spot still being held down by Peter Brock. He's got Dick Johnson glued to his tail as they go down to the left-hander, and Jim Richards sitting in behind them. Watch the front end of the turbo Volvo here as he gets it right down, stands on the brakes. Brock goes through, Johnson and Richards.
And the great news is they get even quicker the next time we bring you motor racing from Amaroo Park with some changes to the car. Second place, Peter Brock. Third, Dick Johnson. Behind him, Jim Richards. Still Peter Williamson behind.
In fact, there's some smoke coming out. I think that's only a brake lock up again. Francevic's Volvo's been popping one there just about every lap. Dick Johnson got a little offline coming on the approach to the bridge about 2 laps ago, and he's been trying to pull back that gap on Peter Brock. He's opened up a little over Jim Richards, but that's the order as they go down into Castrol for the next time, the left-hander. So the Australian Touring Car Championship, the Castrol Grand Final from Oran Park. Robbie Francevic of New Zealand leads. Second spot held by Pete Brock and the Commodore, in third place to Queensland's Dickie Johnson. Johnson has been sitting right in there. Richards can't do much about it. The track needs to be about another 100 foot wider, and he needs to be travelling at about another 30 k's to do anything about it. So Brock finds himself under a little bit of pressure here from Johnson and, of course, the ever-present Jim Richards.
Well, things are as good as gold for Kiwi Robbie Francevic up front, aren't they?
They certainly are, and he's still popping that.
I wish he'd stopped doing that.
Yes, he still pops it every time through that corner, but he's got a reasonable buffer.
That time through, I got him into 1 minute 18.5, so the pace has dropped off a couple of seconds from the opening laps. And Johnson again clawing all over the back of the Commodore, now dives for a run to the inside, can't pull it off. Brock locks up through on the inside. Did he touch it? Yes, I think he may just have given Peter a little bit of a nudge coming out of the left-hander.
Wasn't too much that Johnson could do about it.
No.
But that sort of stiffened everyone up for about 5 or 6 seconds. Johnson's...
Look at Richards.
Johnson has backed off to see what Richards was going to do, or see what Brock was going to do. Oh, look at Richards straight here underneath, and that was not what Johnson had in mind, and Richards has gone through. Just that one problem with Peter Brock, but we've got problems because you can see the back tyre on Richards' car is rubbing up against the guard.
We've had this happen a couple of times with the BMWs.
Yes, well, it was the front left last weekend, and the same thing happened up at Service Paradise, and now we've got the back right hand all dished in.
Yeah, that could have been just with the bruise with Johnson's car.
Yeah. Well, it was very close there in the opening couple of laps.
I think Johnson might have suffered something himself in that little encounter with Brock, because he's backed off quite dramatically to allow Richards to get under him there.
What happens, of course, is you lose your momentum, and in these cars you just can't afford to do that, and you give half a second away, it takes a long time to get it back.
So no problems at this stage for race leader Robbie Francevic. Brock has managed to get out of that little entanglement he had with Dick Johnson. Now he's got Jim Richards right on his tail. There's Neville Crichton coming back into the pit area. I would imagine a very disappointed Neville Crichton.
Implications there are, of course, that this may spoil the JPS BMW plans for a Quinella finish in the Touring Car Championship with Crichton out, because he may not now finish second to Richards in the championship.
It could be.
No, if it was going to stay as is at the moment, you'd find obviously that Richards would win. Johnson would be second and Brock would come up to third, and again the back right hand doing a lot of smoking. I think it is definitely the tyre. It doesn't look to be differential or coming from anywhere else under the car.
No, it's just rubbing on the guard, and Johnson would be aware of this, and whether or not he is going to risk stretching the Mustang at this stage.
The crew are readying themselves for a stop. They'd only do that if in fact the tyre actually deflated, because you couldn't afford to come into the pits and give away something like a minute by the time he got in, got out and changed the wheel. There it is. Centre locking wheels on the Group A BMW, just one nut in the middle. They're ready with the jack, but that would be a last and desperate measure.
Talking about desperate measures, Jim Keogh, car 20's been black flagged and told to get off the course. For what reasons, we're not sure.
Well, the car's been smoking quite a bit in the last few laps. Dropping oil. Frank Gardner in consultation with Neville Crichton.
So
Francevic leads, Brock second, Richards third, Johnson fourth. Peter Williamson in the under 3 litre Toyota Supra is in 5th place on the track, followed in turn by Kent Bagent, then John Harvey and Colin Bond.
Yes, and it's an under 3-litre car that's actually leading this race as well, because the Volvo comes in at about 2,998 cc's. So
Richards.
it's marvellous what a difference a week makes between rounds. I just can't believe how quick Francevic is.
Well, Francevic said yesterday his only problem was shocks, and if they were waiting yesterday for advice that some shocks that they'd flown in from Europe, if they arrived, he felt they had the game plan down pat.
They had big troubles because they were using a very hard poundage rate of spring, and they couldn't get a shock absorber to handle that particular stiff rate of spring. Obviously, they've managed to overcome it. In fact, Wayne Eckersley said last night the team managers, they felt they'd come up with a compromise, but look at Dick Johnson.
I've been trying to spot any damage to Johnson's car, but if there is any, it's on the front right, and it's very hard from this angle to pick it up.
I don't think Johnson has a problem. I think it was just a loss of momentum. Number one with Brock, and then number two with Richards.
Yeah, see, Dick's got about 285 brake horsepower, which is down about 15 on both Brock and certainly on Richards. And once he gets out from behind the toe of the other cars, that's it. I mean, it's very hard to get back.
Well, Richards has certainly got the momentum rolling at the moment in third spot.
Really what Johnson needs is for Richards and Brock to start playing around, trying to pass and repass, and then he can join onto the freight train and pick up the pace.
He's got just a tiny little scar on the front right-hand corner of the car. You can see it quite clearly there, but certainly not enough to be of any problem.
I'd say that was the legacy of the coming together with Brock. So this intriguing scrap continues between Peter Brock, Jim Richards and Dick Johnson. Once again over the Goodyear Bridge and onto the back part of the course. Francevic locks up again, but still maintaining his momentum.
That's where he was having most trouble yesterday in practice. It's a little bit bumpy across that part of the course, and it tends to unsettle the car when you come to the right-hander. But the pressure's really on Brock here, because as every lap goes by at the moment, he gets further and further out to the edge of the racetrack. Johnson again getting out in the rough, saying to us yesterday that this is perhaps one of the hardest tracks on brakes, and he's got his hardest compound front brake pads in at the moment.
So Johnson chases Jim Richards, who chases Peter Brock, who finds that the Robbie Francevic Volvo is disappearing. Confirmation of placings. The Super Kiwi leads at Francevic. Second is Brocky, and third place held by Richards.
Just trying to wave the smoke away.
Another
one of the Capris, I think.
One of the Capris that has pulled out over on the back part of the course.
I think I also saw a flash of Williamson Supra as the cars speared through under the bridge as well. He is off the track and out of the race too.
Yep.
There he is. So whatever was running so well for Williamson in the early laps has packed up in a hurry.
Bad luck for Peter Williamson. Now can Richards haul in Robbie Francevic? He's been able to pull back the early tearaways in the previous Touring Car Championship rounds. Whether or not he can do it here today, only time will tell. There's the gap.
What a familiar sight. Johnson in pursuit of Jim Richards.
Now, something's a little different today. Richards is in pursuit of Robbie Francevic.
Love to know why Brock ended up with a flat left rear. I mean, I thought it was going to be Richards, the guy who had trouble with tyres, not Peter Brock.
Well, whatever the problem Richards had with that tyre rubbing, it seems to have not really bothered him. There's Peter Brock coming in. They're going to do a very, very quick change on Brock's car, try and get him back out in the race as quickly as possible.
You notice the Group A cars this year have an internal jacking system. They attach a coupling below the car. Martin Watt putting a new wheel back on the back left-hand side of the car. Brock would be absolutely furious. And Neil Burns just fastening the wheel. And Brock would still finish, I would say, in the top 10 in this one. It's a pretty quick stop.
It was a quick stop.
Well, while all this has been going on, Brock needing a tyre change, Williamson out of the race, this moves Colin Bond, who's been doing a pretty good job of moving up himself, but this moves him even further up. He's now in 4th place on the racetrack. Great job in this little 2.5-litre Alpha.
Behind him, John Harvey in the second of the dealer team cars.
They've both dropped off Kent Bagent. They've also dropped off Tim Slako in the Rover, as well as Steve Masterton. Look at that. That's what's happened to the tyre. It looks like part of the rim has caved in there.
Well, that probably happened on the way back to the pits, of course, but certainly one dead Momo wheel, one dead Pirelli.
Well, that's cost, obviously, Peter Brock any chance of holding down that second spot in the race. Meantime, the giant killer, Colin Bond, running for Ignis Fridges, and Alpha is clawing his way up to be in company with the race leaders. This is the car, of course, that was campaigned early in the season by Alan Jones.
Yeah, this is the left-hand drive Italian Luigi-built car, which Jones vacated, and the 26 car that we've been following throughout the season is being driven today by Greg Hansford from Queensland, as you said before, Mike. And Bond was pretty unlucky yesterday in practice. He had some drama. In fact, the team had problems with fuel. In the second session of practice, they copped a contaminated batch of fuel. They effectively couldn't qualify up on the grid where they wanted to, and that put them a long way behind the 8-ball right from the word go.
Bond hasn't really dropped off John Harvey in the second dealer team car as yet. Harvey's close enough within striking distance, and also right behind them on the racetrack we've got the two under 2-litre Toyota Corollas driven by John Smith and Drew Price.
There's the front straight, and Colin Bond once again goes through in car number 26. A sterling performance from Bondy today, with John Harvey behind him about 150 metres back in the second of the mobile dealer team Commodores. Then Steve Masterton, the next one back behind him. But Robbie Francevic continues to lead this as we follow Bond once again through Pepsi Corner, and beneath the Goodyear Bridge is Harvey. Getting a little closer. Harvey, of course, making up a lot of his time down the straightaway here. Now Bond comes up on a slower car. The driver does the right thing and keeps out near the wall, so Bond goes through, and Harvey will be the next one into view as they go over the bridge. Is Harvey coming up on the slower car now?
John Harvey driving the car that David Parsons drove last week at Amaru Park. The car had its spare engine fitted on Saturday night, and it's copped a little bit of damage as well on the front left-hand side of the guard, as you can see. So both Brock and Harvey this weekend having to run their spare engines, as Peter Brock also damaged his last weekend. John Harvey having his first run in the car since the Calder round of the Australian Touring Car Championship, and of course this is all in preparation for the Endurance Championship, where he'll be called upon to do some of the shared driving.
20 laps completed here out of 35. Bond pursued by John Harvey in the second of the dealer team cars. Meantime, it's Robbie Francevic who continues to lead this final round of the Touring Car Championship. That's the man.
Oh, up on two wheels.
Isn't it good to see him, though, having a run, because he's been at all the races with the exception of the opener at Winton.
He's a great campaigner.
And a genuine nice guy. He's had problems. Everyone's poked plenty of fun at the Swedish Valiant, as they like to call it. Well, he's hung in there.
He's been up and down the field, that's for sure. He's finished as far back as 9th at Wanneroo, had a win back at Symmons Plains, also had pole position down there that weekend. Just last weekend, when he was in 3rd position and looking very good at Amaru Park, of all things, one of the hoses to the turbo actually fell off. They hadn't done the clip up in all the engine changes during the week, and that's what put Robbie Francevic out after round 9 of the championship. The good thing about their performance this weekend is that it gives them heart to go on from here with the Endurance Championship. And of course they spent a lot of time out here at Oran Park about 2 weeks ago setting the car up and getting it right, and that hard work has obviously paid off.
He always shows grim determination, wears an open face helmet, easy to follow the facial torsions of Robbie Francevic. You notice him locking up the brake and then picking it up onto 3 wheels. Now this is the part where he's been dabbing the brake coming down into the next turn. Has been locking up. Yes, just a little lock up there, but it didn't really need to because it was off the ground for most of the quarter.
They do all their turbo adjustments on the car out here at Oran Park because there's nowhere at Amaru that they can get the thing wound up.
That's right. The gap between 1st and 2nd, by the way, is 4.2 seconds, and that's been fairly stationary in the last couple of laps. So I'll have a look at that again in another couple of laps and just see how the gap is remaining. Francevic, they have completely rebuilt this car from absolute top to tail in the last couple of months. They have experimented with all kinds of different suspension settings. In fact, Wayne Eckersley said to me yesterday that the only thing left on the car that hadn't been changed for last weekend's Amaru Park meeting was, in fact, that inlet hose on the turbo.
Tim Slako from West Australia was seen to advantage in the round of the Touring Car Championship that was held in his home state at Wanneroo, but hasn't had the same luck on his trip here to the east, has he?
He had a dreadful run yesterday in practice. He was so disappointed. He said, I literally have to grab the spoke of the steering wheel and just about pull with both hands to get it off the right-hander after the bridge. He said it's understeering something fierce, and he went out this morning in the warm-up, fiddled with a few settings to try and do something drastically different to the front end of the car, and feels a little bit happier about it, but still in all is a little bit disappointed with the way that it's handling.
But he's in 6th position on the racetrack the way things are going, so he's got the staying power. He's going to figure quite prominently when this gets around to flag waving time.
Yep.
Well, he's done well, and I think he'll benefit from the trip over here to the eastern states. Tim, of course, back there by Alf Barbagallo, West Australian racer himself, and this will be his only run on the eastern states before he heads up for the James Hardie 1000 at Mount Panorama at Bathurst. So, as I said before, he'll be glad he came over and ran the tight and twisting layout at Amaroo Park and a little more open here at Oran Park, and we'll give him an idea of what's to come and who he'll be facing by the time they get to Mount Panorama, obviously for Australia's premier touring car event, the James Hardie 1000, the first weekend of October.
He's been chopping and changing tyres in the last couple of weeks. Last weekend he ran English Dunlops, and this weekend back to Japanese Dunlops. Brian Potts goes through in basically a Group E car, then followed by John Smith, and right behind him is Drew Price, and then the man with the big cat, the Jaguar with the V12, Gary Willington. More horsepower in the last couple of weekends thanks to Rolly Walker, and joining the team incidentally Pat Purcell, who used to build engines and do a lot of engineering for Steve Masterton, and this car going very much better than it has been in the last few rounds of the Australian Touring Car Championship.
And that's Greg Hansford in the second of the Alphas in a new paint job, because the car in fact has been sold to the toy shop. And
last weekend this car broke a little distributor timing plate which put it out at Amaroo Park. But by gee, it's going quickly. They were absolutely flying down the straight yesterday, and there's Greg Hansford in car number 27, the right-hand drive Alpha. Harry Hansford, as he's known, of course, partnered Alan Moffat in the last couple of seasons in the Stuyvesant Mazda RX-7. And what a great combination that is. And Greg finished second in last weekend's round of the Australian Rally Championship in a Mazda. And whilst Mazda is still firming up their plans for the future in Group A touring car racing, Greg's been released from his contract to have a run with Enrico Zanarini and the team this weekend, of course backed by the toy shop. And he's doing a very good job for a fellow who hasn't really spent any time, let me see, in a circuit car. I guess it would go back to the Surfers Paradise round of the Endurance Championship last year. So it's been a long, long time between drinks. He said yesterday that slowly but surely he was starting to feel a lot more comfortable in the car. Radically different, of course, to the Mazda, which is a peripheral port, rotary-powered car, considerably lighter and with a bit of extra horsepower. And also figuring extremely well in this event today is Steve Masterton. Car number 2, Masterton Homes entry, of course, absent from last weekend's round of the Touring Car Championship.
Closing fast on Tim Slaker here.
Completely having rebuilt the brake and suspension setups on the car. And yesterday, at one stage of the game, it looked as though he's going to be in 3rd spot on the grid. That's how good they were going in practice. Steve Masterton has always performed very well at the Sydney rounds of the Touring Car Championship. He's had some bad luck this year. Started out very well with his first appearance at the Better Break Series earlier on this year, but then fell into a bit of a hole, mainly due to the fact they had a dreadful braking system on the car, which, as I said before, they've now rectified.
Here they come onto the back part of the course, and currently running 3rd on the racetrack in the green machine is Dick Johnson. And Dick, it looks like a big day for Swedish Valiants.
Oh, mate, I don't believe it. Actually, I got screwed up. I made a terrible start, Mike, and that sort of put me behind the 8th ball, where I could normally get a bit of a gap if I got out front, because they were really holding me up in the early stages, but it's pretty obvious they're not now.
Yes, I was going to say, you've had an eventful race, a little Peter Brock almost around sideways in front of you at one stage.
Yeah, well, you know, like I dove down the inside of him, and he just pulled over on me, so it's just, that's the way it goes, mate. At least I didn't knock his tyre valve off.
Dick, you seem to lose momentum in that incident, and is that what allowed Richards to get up underneath you?
Yeah, it certainly did. And, you know, that's what I mean. If we can't get a little bit of a break from them, they just blow us off down the straight here.
Dick, in the early part of the race, people were running in the low 17s and some of the leaders even the 16s. Now I notice your board has you back to an 18.4. Are the tyres going off on the car?
I don't think the tyres are going off. Something's vibrating like the proverbial dog trying to do razor blades.
Beautifully put, Wordsworth.
What about brakes, Dick? You said yesterday this place was very hard on brake pads.
Yeah, no, they're holding up really good. We've got the coolers on the front wheels for today, which is the first time we've ever run them. And they just feel really good.
Were you able to spot earlier the tyre rubbing on the back guard of Jim Richards' car?
Yeah, well, I sort of give him a bit of a touch-up. The cheeky bugger went down a hole that he shouldn't have.
Yes, we noticed that.
But Jim makes his mind up once he goes through. He just goes for it. And I'll tell you what.
He's using plenty of road too.
Yeah, I know, mate, but I tell you, he's going to do it once too often one day, I think.
Well, he's almost got it out in the wall there, whether that tyre's gone off or not. We'll let you go back to the race. Thanks for those few words, and we'll let you to soldier on.
Righto, mate.
Thanks, buddy.
Ta-da.
This is the man they're all chasing. Robbie Francevic in car 21. Mark Petch Volvo, turbocharged Volvo. And he's got a good gap on the racetrack over the second and third place cars, and this is the way they stack up at this stage with time running out. Francevic leads the final round of the Touring Car Championship from Jim Richards and Dick Johnson.
Richards will go over the Goodyear Bridge. Johnson stalking him, looking for second place in the championship. Crowd coming alive as Robbie Francevic continues to lead this one. Richards has not backed it off. He's kept the pace on all the way, and whether or not he can last out to the finish, only time will tell. Car getting a little skatey, wearing a rip right around the tyre, I would think, on the bodywork. Down to the left-hander at Castrol again. Closest Johnson's been for several laps. Going to sit right on the tail here of Jim Richards, making sure the tyre doesn't go off. He'll switch to the inside, and Dick Johnson now makes his run. Look at the squirt of the BMW as they come down the straight. Johnson right on his tail as they come down to the braking area, and this is where the car will get unstable for Richards. A dab of the brakes. And lights up the tyre again as Johnson closes on him going beneath the Goodyear Bridge.
Gee, he'll be lucky to survive. They already had some damage on the back right-hand side of this car after the scrap early in the race, and then he clouted the wall again coming up onto the straight. He's got his fingers crossed, and so has Frank Gardner, the entire team, and everybody here. And there's a huge crowd absolutely pinned to the fence waiting to see what's going to happen.
Well, he hasn't got the foot out of the saddle, as they would say. The biggest problem would be coming out of Dunlop if it manages to pop there. He's picked the back wheel up that time over the curb. Johnson right on his tail now. Francevic continues to lead it by about 200 metres. Richards, Johnson, the crowd warming to Johnson, getting onto even terms with Richards, but to his credit, I don't know whether Richards has been able to detect through signals just how bad the tyre is wearing.
3 to go now with Dick Johnson in hot pursuit. I guess it had to happen. Richards has won the last 6 rounds of the Australian Touring Car Championship, and here comes a brave manoeuvre now from Johnson. You notice him pumping the pedal up as he came down to the left-hander at Pepsi. And Jim, who's done absolutely everything right all year, finally makes a mistake at the 10th and final round.
So Francevic leads the black BMW of Jim Richards running in second, and on the tail of Richards, Dick Johnson is in third place. Fourth place being held by Colin Bond. Fifth place by John Harvey in car number 7. Once again, the approach to the bridge. Now, over this part of the racetrack, through this next series of corners, you'll notice Johnson will get very, very close indeed.
As much as I think Jim is an absolute gentleman and a top guy to deal with, I would really love to see Dick get up here and finally go past this black BMW he's tried so hard all year. Right into the boot now of the 635 BM. Right-hander at Pepsi, then it swings left and plunging down.
Here he goes. The move of the race is Johnson back on the inside, leaves Jim as much room as Jim left him. And when they come out of Castrol corner, look at the crowd reacting. Dick Johnson has now gone through to take over second. with only 2 laps remaining in the final round of the Australian Touring Car Championship. The rear view of race cam follows the little gap that Johnson has put on Richards as they head down. And of course, while all this is going on, Kiwi Robbie Francevic, the Auckland ace, continues to lead this one, going in between the slower cars, still doing it nicely. And what cars he's got here to pass. We've got Caprice, Dolomites, everything at the back of the field. But to their credit, the drivers have been following their mirrors and letting the faster cars through without beating their path. Coming up now on one of the Caprice, Francevic, front wheel up on the curb. Now to the left-hander. And he goes by car 75 on the outside. Coming up to Yamaha corner. They drop down. Over the flip-flop now, heading down to Castrol. This will give, as Neil said earlier, a lot of heart to Mark Petch, who's provided Robbie Francevic with this car for the Australian Touring Car Championship Series. He leads onto the straightaway again. 1 lap to go. The last lap board is out for Robbie Francevic. He takes it. Next one across the mark will be Dick Johnson, followed by Jim Richards. He's going to soldier onto the finish. And Francevic, the wind in his sails and the wind going through the turbo boost, goes down to the Pepsi turn, comes out beneath the Goodyear Bridge. He's on his final lap. The man who I really thought, if everything went well for him, would win this race. I know it's easy to jump on the bandwagon halfway through it, but the laps he turned in here in practice last week, while everyone else was getting geared up for Amaroo, Francevic knew he had no chance of winning Amaroo because the course is just way too tight for the handling of the Volvo. But he spent 3 days up here. He got down under Johnson's record and knew that he'd be right this week, providing they could keep the car on the road. Well, they've done that, done it very successfully.
Well, everybody went white this morning when he went out on race tyres and a decent load of fuel and turned in a lap time in the warm-up of about 1 minute 16.1. From that point on, well, the writing was on the board.
Down to Castrol Corner for the final time. The Australian Championship Series that started at Winton in Victoria in February. And a 1-2 domination from BMW, the 10th round. And the win has gone to Kiwi Robbie Francevic in the Turbo Volvo. Second across the straight, Queensland's Dick Johnson. And third place will go to Jimmy Richards in car number 62. That's the second win of the round for 21. Confirmation, Francevic the winner here today. Second goes to Dick Johnson. Third goes to Jimmy Richards.